Right, Black Belt. This idiot here, Alistair Darling. This idiot. Look at this guy. Check this fool. Alistair Darling. This guy. Right. Let's go through this now very carefully. Right? Because this is the type of scrutiny we need in court, meticulously. And this ain't no murder trial. There are more complex cases than this heard in courts. Very serious murder cases, fingerprints, chemicals, coroners, given the fact that also, the entire fully funded, efforts of the police force, can't find Madeleine McCann, but spend a lot of money trying, there are complicated casework. This casework isn't complicated because we don't need to find evidence, we don't need to find fingerprints, we don't need any complicated chemical analyses, we don't even need any witnesses, we don't need any professional witnesses coming in at all, because everything is written down for us very simply in chronological order, right? It's all there. There are 5 or 6 pieces of information which are quite clear, and it doesn't actually take a genius to work it out. It's a little bit harder than working out, putting the square in the square box, the circle through the circle hole, into the box through the circle hole, the triangle through the triangle, and the star through the star, right? Right, Black Belt, I've laid it all out here now, really simply. I've got you some photographs, 2 photographs of the actual context of the original context of what's actually happening, some kind of real world reference point to practical, operational, how it actually was, a real painting, a real scenario of in use. So this is actually what's happening, right? So what we need to look at is what is going on with the legislation. And I've tagged you here, right? And we start here. And my battery's about to go, so I don't want to take too long. Right, this is in chronological order now, and we don't need any more than this. There's 1, 2, 3, 4... No, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we've got 3. So there's that. Sorry, there's 2005 amendment, and there's 2003, and then the 1993, 1988, and 1982. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right, there's five pieces here to work it out from. So we start with the first one that we bring in, which is in there may be something older, but I don't think that they had a regulation before this. And the thing is, I've got all the highway code books, and the first mention of anything to do with seat belts in any of the highway code books, they don't even mention it until in this 1982 one, right? So if there was anything, it's not been mentioned. So we've got this Motor Vehicles Wearing of Seat Belts Act 1982, right? And it's the wording of it is you don't have to wear it when you're delivering in the local area, right? So we're setting out now in law. It's been defined. It's referring to that you don't have to wear the seatbelt when you're delivering in the local area. Now, we know that from the information I just showed you in the other book, what's happening with the delivery vehicles is they're only delivering in a prescribed area. They're only allowed to drive in and operate in an area that their employer has a license to deliver and operate in, right? They've got set runs. Like this vehicle, it is delivering here and there, right? A little bit like buses. So it's best to kind of imagine it like a bus route. even if you want to imagine it, I know you've got like bus routes that go from one town to one town, but they usually go through local areas. They don't normally just go straight down the main road. They've got a route. But, buses, they've got basically essentially a set route that they're licensed to run on, right? People were getting licensed to deliver and operate in certain areas. That's why the law says delivering in a local area, because they could only operate in certain areas. So this sets precedence over the meaning and what the interpretation is and it's set up for originally and intended. So we know that it's the haulage companies and the delivery companies who are setting out and what the areas are. That they're not set in the law and they're not prescribed in the law. So that's an act for wearing seatbelts. Now, then, we've got the 1988 Road Traffic Act, and we get a clause in the act. So then we've got two clauses. So it's in two places. We've got the seatbelt law in the Wearing of Seatbelts Act, and also enacted into one of the major road traffic acts. Now, does the Major Road Traffic Act 1988 change the meaning or anything like that? It's in section 14, 2B1, as prescribed. In the meaning of prescribed in that act says, or except in section 5A, means prescribed by regulations made by the Secretary of State. But there weren't any, he didn't make any regulations. He didn't prescribe any regulations for wearing of seatbelts. He didn't prescribe any. He didn't make any. So in section 14.2b, wearing the seatbelt as prescribed, it can't mean anything that's prescribed by the Secretary of State because he hasn't prescribed anything. He hasn't made any laws. He hasn't prescribed any distance for seatbelts. It refers to the motor vehicles wearing of seatbelts for the local area, right? Which means that actually it means that the company, haulage companies, are prescribing where the vehicles go. Prescribed, apparently in section 5A, prescribed doesn't mean by the Secretary of State. But whether it does mean by the Secretary of State, he hasn't prescribed anything for seatbelts. And neither is he in the other act, even if there is something, what you would say prescribed, but it's not prescribed by the government because the haulage companies have to get a license. So they're licensed to operate in certain areas. So you could say the government are doing it, but they're doing it through vehicle operating licenses, not through an act of law. It's separate to an enactment. It's through licenses. Now, so from 1988, the Secretary of State isn't prescribing anything. And the word prescription is put in for seatbelts, but it doesn't mean, it can't mean by the Secretary of State. It has to be through the operating areas. And I don't actually think in 1988 you had to have a license by that time anyway, because I'm quite certain that, I think like HGVs and so forth have to have licenses, but if it's a 3.5 ton van under a certain weight, it's still classed as motor car, aren't there? So under a certain weight, they don't need a license to operate in certain areas, right? So let's see if there's any. So after that, there's two. The next one that happens to it is the Motor Vehicles Wearing of Seatbelts Regulations 1993. So we update this Motor Vehicles Wearing of Seatbelts 1982, which says local area, with the Motor Vehicles Wearing of Seatbelts Regulations 1993. Now here's his big chance now. He's got a big chance in 1993 now. He's updating the one that referred to the local area, right? And we've got another act running alongside it that says as prescribed by the Secretary of State, but he hasn't prescribed anything. So he's got a big chance now to update this 1993 one and say that, okay, then, yeah, as prescribed. Right? But he doesn't, does he? It's a local area. So he's still confident in 1993 that it's not a number that the Secretary of State is prescribing. And he hasn't prescribed any number or distance, none. And he's very confident of that in 1993, from 1982 to 1993, even after the 1988 Act, and inserting the meaning of prescribed. He's still confident that it's the whole area, the whole area and nothing but the area, so help me God, right? Then, in 2003, with he updates the 1988 Section 14, which with the Railways and Transport Safety Act, which has got nothing to do with that, but funnily enough, this book that I've got here is all about Rail and Rail Act, which has got information in it. It's almost like a little homage to it. He's got a big chance now. So the Railway and Transport Safety Act 2003 is as prescribed. So that is updating with prescribed, right? Well, it doesn't actually change it. It keeps prescribed. So that is basically as the 1988 one. So basically the 1988 definition doesn't change. The 1988 is inserted into the Railways Transport Safety Act and updated, but not changed, as prescribed. But there is nothing prescribed. He has prescribed no distance. So, and he's still confident that at this point, as he has not prescribed anything, but he must refer to something, it can only refer to the local area that the haulage companies or the vehicles are allowed to operate in, or what the delivery areas are. Right? And now is when idiot comes in. Alistair matching eyebrows, darling. Right? Alistair matching acts of law, darling. It's like, his eyebrows and his hair don't match colour, like these acts prescribed or local area don't match. Now let's do something really clever. Right? The Motor Vehicles Wearing of Seatbelts Amendment Regulations 2005 brings in a 50 metres maximum length you can drive. What use is that? It means that every time you're going to deliver something, you got to take your seatbelt on and off, which is going to be a major pain. When there's people on buses coming past, stood up, holding 2 shopping bags, possibly potentially flying straight through the window. 50 people stood up. Police walking up and down, trying to find people on their mobile phones or without the seatbelt on, like superintendent flying through a window. Be all right if you had a laughing policeman. If a bus slammed his brakes on, he'd be laughing flying through the air like superintendent, Superman, or through the top floor. Or what happens if there is no roof? What about those buses in York that go around with no roof on? You could fill it with police. They could have a party on the roof. You could have the entire police force having a party on the roof, having the tour of York and slam the brakes on. Then you could have an entire, like one of those Marvel movies. It'd be like a Marvel movie, superheroes, dun dun dun, like the Force. May the Force be with you. William the Conqueror would have seen something then, wouldn't he? On the tapestry, coming over on a kinky boat, Hastings. So what Darling does is, for working class people who are working, doing a job, delivering stuff, he thinks it'd be a clever Tom, Dick and Harry, and he thinks that wouldn't it be clever to make working class people more criminal, make them more criminal and find them more money, so they can rack it up on working class people, slap fines on them, right, and make them into criminals. When there's people flying past on buses with no roofs on the top, we're having to wear seatbelts stood up with 2 shopping bags. an entire police force on the top floor. You know, this is it. Thinks he'd be clever. And he does know, he knows at the bottom, he even notes in that 2005 Act that the meaning of prescribe as Secretary of State, now I'm prescribing a distance. Now he's prescribing the distance. And he says that see for the meaning of prescribed, see the 1988 Act. Now, maybe he thought that this person was being clever by prescribing something, but never prescribing it. He just prescribes nothing. So he thought he would prescribe something and make a lot of money for the government out of it at our expense, when it's highly impractical, when there's taxi drivers and other people, you know, with an exemption. But he's noting that if you want to see what prescribe means, via prescribing the Secretary of State of Transport, but he's meant that the whole way through. But there was nothing prescribed, and it wasn't the Secretary of State for Transport, really, was it? It wasn't through an act of law. And I only think that if it was prescribed by government through licenses, that's got nothing to do with these acts. It was being done through a completely different method. He hasn't even changed the method of prescription. And I don't think vehicles under 3.5 tonnes have to have a haulage licence to operate in areas anyway. They're exempt. So that prescription can't apply to those vehicles under that, but they can still be goods vehicles. So you might have an exempt thing. But what he's doing is the other acts are still in effect. And then so he's almost zigzagging between them all. I don't think that it never was referring to anything that the Secretary of State of Transport was setting a distance in law, because it was referring